My father cut me out of his life for a woman whose past victims are still counting their losses. He saw love in her. I saw disaster. When I exposed her secrets, everything turned upside down. All right, here's the deal. I'm Alex, 25, Dad, Richard, 53, and I used to be this solid team. Ever since Mom passed, we had this unbreakable connection. But then, cue dramatic music in waltzes Jenna, a.k.a. Gold Digger Supreme. She's 28, and yeah, her whole vibe screamed, "I'm here for your wallet, not your wisdom." At first, it was small stuff. Family dinners became just Dad and Jenna outings. Then came the silent but obvious shift in his priorities. The kicker? I found out he rewrote his entire will, and guess who's the lucky new beneficiary? Yep, Jenna. Just like that, I went from his main support system to someone he didn't owe an explanation. One night I tried to talk to him, real heart-to-heart style, but he just gave me this look, like I was some annoying side character in his life now. "Jenna's been good for me, Alex. You'll understand when you're older," he said. Seriously? I'm his son, not some random bystander. Well, if Jenna thinks she's waltzing in and taking everything without a fight, she's got another thing coming. So, let's talk about when my suspicions went from 0 to 100. I mean, yeah, Jenna had that whole suspiciously charming vibe, but I was giving Dad the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he just needed a break from reality, a little sparkle in his life, but that fantasy bubble burst fast. One night, Dad accidentally left his phone at my place. Now, I'm not usually the nosy type, but the notifications popping up, let's just say curiosity got the best of me. Turns out there were messages from some private security company confirming regular payments? Yeah, exactly. Since when did my dad need a bodyguard? And why was this so-called security being paid for by Jenna? Something was definitely off, but here's where things got wild. I ran into a buddy who works at a law firm, and just casually, he mentions Jenna's name. Apparently, she'd been involved in not one, not two, but 3 different relationship dissolutions. And by relationship dissolutions, I mean she left each guy with an empty wallet and a messy court battle. This lady was like a pro-level manipulator, and my dad was falling right into her trap. When I brought it up to him, he brushed me off like I was talking about the weather. "Alex," he says, all serious, "Jenna's just been unlucky in the past. Don't make assumptions." Yeah, sure, Dad, because unlucky is exactly how most people would describe a 3-time jackpot divorce settlement winner. I couldn't sit back and watch him get played, so I started digging deeper, using every connection I had to get the dirt. And boy, there was a lot of it. It was like peeling an onion, layer after layer of shady moves. Jenna wasn't just in this for love. She had a whole playbook, and my dad was the latest sucker to take the bait. Honestly, I was caught between laughing at the absurdity and wanting to throw something. This was my dad, the guy who taught me about being smart, watching your back, not trusting too easily. And here he was, totally hypnotized by someone who was practically a walking red flag. So, yeah, now I had proof, but the real question was, how was I going to get him to actually see it? All right, so after Dad decided to ignore every red flag I threw his way, I knew I had to step up my game. This wasn't just about Jenna taking advantage of him. It was about saving my dad from becoming another sorry chapter in her Gold Digger Chronicles. If he wasn't going to listen to reason, then I'd have to hit him with cold, hard evidence. Time to go full-on detective mode. First move? I hired a private investigator. Yeah, it sounds dramatic, but desperate times, right? Besides, if I was going to get the real dirt, I needed a pro who could dig deeper than a couple of Instagram stalks and Google searches. This guy was ex-law enforcement or something, the kind of person who could find your high school report cards if he needed to, and trust me, I needed all the help I could get. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and my investigator hits me back with exactly the kind of news I was hoping for. Turns out, Jenna wasn't just dating my dad. She was double-dipping, seeing some other dude on the side. Apparently, she'd been spotted cozying up with this random guy in places my dad would never go, like dingy bars on the outskirts of town. Real classy, right? And the best part? I got photos. Crystal clear, high-definition photos of her with this guy. I had to stop myself from laughing out loud when I saw them. So I showed up at Dad's place, armed with the photos, ready to stage a full-blown intervention. I laid out the evidence, every photo, every bit of info, hoping he'd finally see the light. But in true Dad under a spell fashion, he barely even blinked. His response? "Alex, you're letting your imagination get the best of you. Jenna's been nothing but honest with me." Nothing but honest? Honest about what? Her side hustle as a heartbreaker? I was speechless. Here I was, presenting him with undeniable proof, and he was shrugging it off like I'd just shown him pictures of last week's weather. At that point, I realized I was dealing with more than just Jenna's manipulation. My dad was in complete denial. It was honestly infuriating, but it also pushed me to go even further. If he needed more proof, then more proof he would get. Jenna was not getting away with this alright, here's how it went down. Family dinner, me, Dad, and Miss I'm totally innocent, Jenna. She's all smiles, playing her part like she's auditioning for world's best girlfriend, while Dad's sitting there, clueless as ever. I'd had enough of the games, so halfway through dessert, I just went for it. "Hey, Jenna," I said casually. "Been to Rudy's bar lately? You know, with that friend of yours?" She froze mid-bite, while Dad looked at me totally lost. Jenna tried to laugh it off, but I whipped out my phone and showed her the picture of her with Mr. Mystery Man at Rudy's, looking way too cozy. "Oh, he's just an old friend," she stammered, but I cut her off. "Right. And you two just run into each other every Thursday?" Dad looked shocked, trying to piece it all together, but Jenna shot me a death glare and leaned into her sweet act. "Richard, he's just trying to make trouble." And then Dad turns to me and says, "Alex, I trust Jenna." I nearly laughed. "On his trust?" I stood up, gave them both one last look, and said, "Just remember, Dad, don't say I didn't warn you." All right, so after the dinner disaster where Dad basically chose Jenna the Great Pretender over cold, hard evidence, I knew I had to hit harder. If he wanted proof, I was about to bring a truckload. So I went all in, found every person Jenna had ever scammed, from her ex-husbands to some pretty disgruntled ex-friends. Turns out, this woman had more skeletons in her closet than a haunted house. I started with her last ex-husband, Doug. Now, Doug was a gem, a guy who'd thought he'd won the lottery when he met Jenna. Spoiler, he didn't. We met up at this rundown diner, and after one coffee, Doug was spilling everything. Turns out Jenna not only milked him dry financially, but also left him with a mountain of debt she'd racked up for the both of them. Apparently, her favorite phrase was, "We're in this together." Right, together until the bank comes knocking. Classic Jenna. But that wasn't even the best part. Doug handed me receipts, literal receipts, of every ridiculous thing she bought on his credit card. We're talking designer bags, spa treatments, even a weekend business trip to Cancun. I was laughing so hard I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. Armed with this evidence, I reached out to a few more of her former friends, who all had their own horror stories. It was like a Jenna support group. They painted the full picture. Jenna would swoop in, charm her way into their lives, drain their bank accounts, and then disappear faster than you could say gold digger. Honestly, it was almost impressive, if it weren't so twisted. So I put together a full Jenna's Greatest Hits package, complete with photos, bank statements, and all her ex's stories. The cherry on top? A lovely little voice recording Doug still had, of Jenna saying, "I'd never let a man leave me with nothing. That's just bad business." Now, the only thing left was to decide when to drop this bomb on Dad. It had to be big, public, and completely impossible for him to brush off alright, so now I had my arsenal. The ultimate Jenna expose, ready to blow her little scheme wide open. I just needed the perfect stage, and then it hit me. A family gathering. Yep, nothing like a little public humiliation to get the message across, right? I set up a dinner, making it sound like I wanted to clear the air and make peace. Dad was all in, thinking this was some heartfelt family bonding moment. Jenna showed up in full diva mode, probably thinking she'd already won. Little did she know, the show was just getting started. As we sat down, Jenna was already working her charm, laughing a little too loudly at Dad's every joke, throwing these fake, loving glances his way. Meanwhile, I was just biding my time, watching the clock, waiting for the moment to strike. I'd set up my laptop with a slideshow of all her greatest hits, just a click away. So, halfway through dinner, I casually said, "Hey, Dad, there's actually something I wanted to show you guys." Jenna looked at me, clearly intrigued, probably expecting some mushy family photo slideshow or whatever. I pulled out the laptop, clicked play, and boom, up pops a picture of Jenna cozying up with her friend at that dingy bar. She froze. I turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Recognize this guy, Jenna? Or was that just one of your unlucky coincidences?" Her face went pale, but before she could even think up an excuse, I clicked to the next slide, her shopping sprees on Doug's credit card, bank statements and all. "Oh, and this one," I said, feigning surprise. "Looks like a weekend getaway to Cancun. You and the love of your life were really working on that tan, huh?" Dad's jaw dropped. He looked at Jenna, back at the screen, and then back at Jenna, who was now trying to sputter out something. Anything. "Richard, it's not what it looks like. Alex is twisting things." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Am I? Because here's Doug's statement talking about how you wiped him out, left him in debt, and basically ghosted him. Sounds like a pattern to me." At this point, she was desperate, looking at Dad with these big, pleading eyes. "Richard, please, you know me. You know who I am." "Yeah," I cut in. "He does now." Dad looked crushed, stated as if he deep, like his whole world was collapsing. And maybe it was, but I wasn't about to let Jenna worm her way out of this one. She grabbed her purse, mumbled some excuse, and stormed out the door. Dot all right, comma. So Jenna stormed out after my little presentation. But let's just say that was far from the grand finale. I knew she wouldn't give up that easily, not when there was so much money on the line. So I had one last move ready, just in case she tried to spin her way out of this. And boy, did she try. The very next morning, she showed up at Dad's house, all crocodile tears, and I can explain. I was there too, because no way I was missing the epic ending to this saga. Jenna was laying it on thick, telling Dad how I'd misunderstood everything, and that those pictures were totally taken out of context. She even had the nerve to say she was the real victim here. The audacity. Dad just looked at her, his face blank, but I could tell he was actually listening to her. I could practically hear my own blood boiling. So, I decided it was time for the ultimate mic drop. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the voice recording Doug had given me. There it was, in Jenna's own voice, saying, "I'd never let a man leave me with nothing. That's just bad business." You could hear a pin drop. Jenna's face went from fake sweet to pure rage in about 2 seconds flat. "Oh, so that's what you meant by misunderstood, right, Jenna?" I smirked, enjoying every second. She stammered, tried to come up with some excuse, but it was over. Dad had finally seen her for who she was. He just shook his head, looking at her like she was a stranger. And then he said it. The words I'd been waiting to hear. "Jenna, I think it's time for you to leave." She tried one last desperate attempt, grabbing his arm, putting on her saddest face. "Richard, please. You know I love you." But Dad just looked at her, totally done. "I don't think you know what that means," he said quietly. And with that, Jenna finally left for good. So, Jenna was finally out of our lives, but let me tell you, the fallout was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. After she stormed out, Dad just sat there, staring at the wall, probably replaying every embarrassing, cringe-worthy moment he'd ever spent with her. Honestly, it was almost painful to watch. Almost. A few days later, he called me over. I was expecting some kind of awkward apology, but Dad went straight to business. "Alex," he said, "I need to put things back in order. I don't know what I was thinking." What he was thinking? Good question, because I've got zero clue how he thought Jenna was anything but trouble. But hey, I wasn't about to rub it in. Well, maybe a little. Guess love really is blind, huh, Dad? I said, trying not to laugh. He just shook his head, muttering something about bad decisions and lessons learned. Yeah, I'd say it was a pretty expensive lesson. He asked me to help him sort out the mess she'd left behind, which included some eye-watering credit card bills and a few questionable transactions. Turns out Jenna had been quietly funneling cash into her own accounts for months. When I pointed this out, Dad looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Guess she wasn't the honest influence you thought, huh? I said, not holding back the sarcasm. He just gave me a tired smile, like he'd finally come back to reality. Then came the best part. He rewrote the will. Everything went back to the way it should have been. Our family legacy was safe, and Jenna got exactly nothing, not even a cent. To add a little cherry on top, we made sure to cancel all her fancy subscriptions, from her favorite wine club to her luxury spa account. I might have had way too much fun watching those charges disappear. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Jenna had already found her next target, some poor guy who owned a car dealership in the next town. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But hey, everyone makes their own choices, right? Dad and I were solid again. It took a while, but I think he finally sees the world with clearer eyes. And as for me, I've got my family's back. And a front row seat if any other Jennas decide to try their luck.